Well, welcome everyone. It's an honor here to have Stephan with us here today. This is the talk on conservation agriculture adoption in Kenya, lessons from the field and network by Stephan Lutz. If you are just coming in, we're going to go ahead and do a intro for Stephan, and then Stephan will present, and hopefully we'll have some time for some question and answer at the end. So if you have questions, feel free to post them as Stephan is talking in the Q&A tab to the right of your screen if you're on your web browser. And you can also put any technical difficulties that you're having in the chat, and we can hopefully address those as we go. But I'm excited to have Stephan Lutz here with us. Stephan holds a master's in science in ecological agriculture and a bachelor's in tropical agriculture from the University of Kassel in Germany. He's worked for the last 20 years with World Renew in Kenya as a program consultant, consulting with the Anglican Church based relief and development organizations. He has a deep passion and longing for biblical creation stewardship, climate change advocacy, strategic thinking, participatory community development, and working with vulnerable smallholder farmers in producing nutritious and diverse foods in an ecological, economically viable, and sustainable way. Stephan was born and raised in Honduras in Central America, and has lived in several other countries, including Germany, the US, Mali. He currently resides with his wife, Alicia, and his two sons in Nairobi, Kenya. So Stephan, welcome. Thank you for taking the time to be with us today, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Elliot, and good evening from Nairobi to everybody. I don't know if it's morning or afternoon where you are, or evening if you're in Africa or Asia, I guess. It's a nice evening here. Just about perfect temperatures, 23 degrees Celsius, and 7 o'clock at night. So good to be here, and thank you for this opportunity to talk today. I don't know what else to say other than you have introduced myself. I grew up in Central America. I lived in Mali, US, Europe, and now in Kenya. Kenya has become my new home. And I've been here for almost 21 years now and working with World Renew. And I still love what I do. People might wonder, after 20 years, don't you get bored? And I'm excited. And it's just been an honor and joy to be here, and also to be able to share with you tonight some of these lessons. I don't want it to be a lecture. I just want it to be an interaction with you all at some point and I just want to share some of the things that I've learned in the last 20 years. Well, let me say in the last 10 years specifically, working with conservation agriculture in Kenya. We started introducing conservation agriculture about 10 years ago, give or take. And lots of good stuff has come, lots of challenges. Also, arisen from from our. It's not easy to have a conversation afterwards. So, do I start my presentation now? Let me start with. Can we have the screen share happening? Thank you.
Yep, we're putting it up right now. It's just a little bit of a lag here, Stephan. 1 second.
Okay, sorry about that. So as I said, I'll talk about conservation agriculture adoption. And when we say about adoption, we always think about how well has something been adopted, how well has something been received, right? In terms of the trainings that we do, the activities and implementation of projects we do in the area of conservation agriculture, or in any area for that matter, health and micro enterprise and any other development. So I want to talk a little bit from just share some lessons, some best practices from both the field and what I've experienced from conservation agriculture, and also from a network that I've been able to lead in the last 4 years, which is a conservation agricultural hub, kind of a little echo, if you want to call it, here in Kenya on conservation agriculture. And it's been It's been also up and downs in that one as well, but lots of good learning. So we all know what, can we do the next slide, please? We all know what conservation, I'm assuming we all do, but let me just repeat. Conservation agriculture is an approach, a methodology, if you want to say, to managing agro-ecosystems for improved and sustained productivity, increased profits and food security, while preserving and enhancing the resource base and the environment. Very important here is not just the productivity and improvement of getting more crops and of course being productive, which we always want to, and increase food security and profits and economic gains, but also to preserve the environment and the soils. For me, it's really important that we don't just think about productivity and gains, but we think about long-term sustainability. And I'll talk more about that. This is next slide, please. This is an example of conservation that you can see that it has, it's actually not tilled, it has some covering, and these are beans that we've done in one area in Kenya called the Rift Valley. We can go to the next one. There's three, actually, if you click again, Elliot, you'll get the third one. Yeah, thank you. There's three principles and practices that I'm assuming most of you know, so I'm not going to go over this a lot, but the three principles that we promote in conservation agriculture is minimum tillage, maximizing soil cover, and crop association and rotation. So we try to not disturb the soil, very important. And of course, when there is a hard pan, and we will have some disturbance that needs to happen. But in most cases, we try not to minimize the disturbance of the soil and the tillage. I believe in the US you call it no-till agriculture. Then we also try to maximize soil cover. This is a very key part of it, and that is to always keep your ground covered with mulch material, with anything, leaves or branches. You can even do residue, of course, compost. So anything that will cover your soil. And in this one, I also recommend that one thing that we've learned is that we have different kinds of coverings and not just one type of covering. So if you put branches, then you might want to have some mulch, and so that the different times of decomposing, that helps with the soil cover. And then the crop association rotation, which are very healthy for any healthy crop production. Next slide, please. Here we see a field in Mount Kenya area, not so far from Nairobi, where the maize has been basically slashed or harvested, sorry. And after harvest, the stalk will remain in the soil, in the field. So we want to keep as much as organic matter as we can into the soil or on the soil so that it can cover it. And this has been a really big challenge in conservation agriculture. And that's why we also talk about green manures and cover crops. So we sometimes plant them apart from keeping these. We plant these green manures so that we have enough soil cover. Next one, please. So the lesson so far we've learned in conservation agriculture is that CA plots are most likely to produce some harvest, especially in erratic rainfall seasons compared to traditional planted plots. So we're seeing that even though it might be not a good year or a more too much rain or too less rain, we're getting something out of it. That's been our experience. We also realizing that the CA plots produce better yield and quality of crops. We were especially encouraged to see that the potatoes that were grown under CA were much a better quality, which would fetch a better price on the market and therefore higher income. And CA also saves time and farmers, and if they're able to use that time to do other things, they raise animals, they do value addition, or even go for a job to just earn some extra money. So we have actually seen that it's time. It helps with your time. It also uses local resources and is in general profitable when combined with some form of irrigation. So we're seeing that the economic benefits from CA are there, especially for bringing back youth into farming. In Kenya, we have about 70% of population is young people. However, a lot of the people that are farming in Kenya right now are actually more elderly people, above 50. So we want to bring back young people, and you would only bring back young people when they start seeing money, when they start seeing economic benefit. And of course, for us, it's also when they start seeing that the soil is improving and the environment is getting better, because that would be long-term now, so that even their children can go into farming without any issues. When used with green manure cover crop system, as mentioned before, like Lab in Kenya, conservation agriculture can provide sufficient ground cover and gradually improve soil fertility and structure over time. So those are some of the best lessons we're seeing. Can we go to the next one, please? Sorry, I read the next one. Thank you. Here we have some photos of some farmer exposure visits and practical on-farm trainings, which have been important components of promoting adoption of CA. So yes, we do some classroom, and yes, we talk, wherever we can about CA and introduce it to farmers. But some of the most effective ways have been on-farm training, and also having these exchange trips where farmers go from one area to another. Sometimes keep it to the same agroecological zone, because then it's a lot easier for the farmer to identify with that farmer. Because if you take a farmer from a dry area to a better, let's say a high productive area, they will say, well, you have the rain, so that's why it works. So it's always good to also take that into consideration. But these have been very important for us over the years. Now, some obstacles and challenges we've observed in adoption of CA is CA requires a behavior change. Sorry, the next slide. CA requires a behavior change, especially not tilling the soil and keeping ground covered all the time. So this is something that farmers don't usually do, especially not tilling and keeping it covered. Usually they till and they actually do the opposite, and they keep the ground. They don't want any residue on they actually burn it for to keep it clean. They want they call it keeping the field clean. So that's as you can see, that's a behavior change that is happening, that needs to happen, and that takes time. Mulch material needed for CA is a limiting factor in expanding CA plots. The mulch also often competes with animal feed, and especially drier agro-pastoralist areas. So we're realizing that mulch material we need to have a sufficient ground cover is limiting. And I'm talking from Kenya, East Africa perspective. But I believe it's also an issue in other places because we just don't have enough of the mulch material. And it also competes often with animal feed in those areas where there are animals to feed. There's also an lack of overall technical CA support available for expanding CA work in Kenya. That is slowly changing. We're seeing some, some institutions or some for-profits, businesses coming in with CA tools nowadays. We're seeing the government doing some research on that. So we're seeing some work. They're seeing that CA, that there's something coming up with CA, that it is valuable methodology, and the more the farmer adopts it in Kenya, the more also we're going to have the support available. Can we do the next slide, please? Now, CA can contribute positively to productivity and adaptation resilience objectives. Also, the degree of success varies considerably by farm, household, and regional characteristics. So it's not a blueprint everywhere, and we can't say if we do CA, we're going to get the same. And that's, I think, the beauty of agriculture. Those involved in agriculture, it's an art. We work, we adapt, we bring in the principles, but in the end, we let the farmer do their own experimentation and do their own also learning in the process. CA, if adopted widely, has the potential to help build resilience in smallholder farming systems. I'm convinced about this, that if it is adopted and it is adopted by the farmer and in the way that he or she want to do farming, then it would be definitely help build the resilience of smallholder farming system, especially in this climate change era, where we know that we have extreme weather patterns, which is not easier for our agricultural development work in the future. Several other factors might influence CA adoption. Next slide, please. Several other factors might influence CA adoption. Farmers may be reluctant to adopt CA due to lack of technical know-how, or due to culture and traditions, or both. Limited linkages to output and input markets, drudgery of some technologies, need to address weed infestation under CA, improve market access conditions, and find ways to get youthful farmers engaged in conservation agriculture. Next slide, please. Conservation agriculture can be more climate smart, and its uptake can be enhanced by reframing, better targeting, adapting CA to location-specific economic and biophysical, and through greater and more effective public spending on agricultural research and development. That's a mouthful, but I think it's important to mention that, and it actually just came out in an article from Frontiers in Agronomy just this year, on June 22nd. So this is very new information we have, and we are seeing a revolution, I think, in many ways in CA, and people are seeing the value of CA. I can say for Kenya, the network and the awareness of CA has really grown in the last 10 years, and I'll talk more about that as well. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to switch a little bit of gears, and I'm going to talk a little bit about World Renew programs, and so not just about the methodology of CA, which has been very impactful in the last 10 years, but also about some of the ways, methodologies in which the organization I work for, World Renew, and we have noticed that that during the last few years, we have noticed that quicker and impacting CA and other community development activities, adoption rates are closely linked with these 4 factors. So these are factors that I've realized will also increase the adoption of CA and any other actually development practice that we have done. Next slide. One is a mature community with strong leadership and vision that is ready to own their own development and even contribute in kind resources like labor and time towards the success of the program and project. So the community leadership and the vision and their contribution and their ownership of development, and as we can see in this picture, this is a participatory process we do with the community where they identify some of the crops that they grow and to what priority they give it. And that's just one example of a participatory approach, but involving the community, engaging them so that they make a decision. That's very important. So that's the one principle. Next slide, please. The other one that very few people talk about, but I felt is very important to mention, is that a donor or an implementing partner that is very understanding to the priorities of a farmer and community needs, and has sufficient time needed, for sustainable impact of a program, and have the necessary flexibility to actively listen and adapt to the continuous changing needs of a community. Development is not a static. It moves, it develops, it evolves, and we have to be very conscious about understanding that development needs time, development needs a flexible approach, that things can change. That, for example, right now we have a food security program up in northern Kenya, and there's drought. We cannot continue as normal because of that situation. We have to now intervene with the drought and do something else so we can continue. So it's a food security program that will be successful in the end. So we have to continuously be adapting and being flexible and listening to community of what they want to do and how they want to do it. So that is a big one. The third principle, next slide. So the next one is about a participatory, integrated, and holistic community approach that engages all aspects of the person and life needs, so physical, economic, emotional, cultural, and spiritual. We usually very often deal with the physical and the economic, but rarely deal into the emotional, cultural, and spiritual part of a person when we do projects. So that's something that we as World Renew, and I believe others, are really seeing that if you don't tackle these, it's going to be very hard to look for sustainability. We have to get into the relationships with people, with our partners, so that we find out the emotional, even the cultural and spiritual, on top of course, the physical and economic needs that they have. And you can only do that when you spend time and when you actively listen to people. And the last one, the fourth principle that I've noticed is very key, is passionate, committed, and skilled extension workers who spend frequent and quality time with farmers in the field. This is one that I've realized lately how important it is, because when you have passion, when you have a commitment, and when you have skill, and these all together, you will actually enable transformation in the community, because the community will notice. They will see that you are there. You come to them. You are always you spend time with them. You are interested in them, and that can only happen often when you have that passion and the commitment, and even the skill necessary. So wherever I see our Anglican Development Services, which is the partner that we work with in Kenya, wherever I see staff who have this passion, commitment, and skills, I see impact. And that's why I'm making this relationship and mentioning it to you. So the last thing I want to talk about is the CA Kenya Hub. Next slide, thank you. This is a hub that was formed pretty much 10 years ago when we started doing conservation agriculture work, meaning that we started to bring in awareness that CA is a methodology that we can promote and see how farmers take it up. So it's been in existence since 2001. The Canadian Food Range members, including World Renew, were pioneers to forming this hub. And we were actually only 4 people who started it. The CA Hub up to now, I must say, has grown from 80 to 90 individuals. I think we're around 90 right now. And we have around, at the moment, 25 members. So that has also grown from the last time I presented this, and are consistently active and have signed an official agreement. In fact, we have a hub meeting tomorrow, and we usually meet every quarter. And it's a great time of sharing, a great time of talking, a great time of sharing updates of what CA has done in farmers' lives, wherever they live, wherever they are. And we have many organizations that form it, and I'll talk more about that. Accomplishments of the CA Hub include trainings, linkages, exchange visits to the field. We have the quarterly meetings. We do fundraising efforts together, and we link network with other organizations. So next slide, please. Its sole purpose of this hub is to share, exchange information, and create opportunities to members for growth and impact in large scale. It is composed of nonprofit organizations, academic and research institutions, government entities, and private sector. So you can see we have a whole cadre of many players, many stakeholders, and many members. So not just the NGO world, not just academia, but we have the institution, we have the government, we have the private sector, and we are open to anybody. It also provides a platform for bringing awareness and advocating on the value of CA for smallholder farmers in Kenya, especially in semi-arid areas where crop farming is still possible, but rainfall is erratic. Next slide, please. The CA Hub in Kenya provides a platform to engage any practitioner, academic, researcher, educator, business person to get to know more about CA and learn from others. It is really about learning. It is really about listening. It is not just, and I'll talk more about it, not just a club. It's really a place where we can be yourself and just learn with others. A network like this with 80 members that has lasted for almost 10 years without any outside funding has credibility and can advocate for higher and faster CA adoption at a county and national level in Kenya. So we've not received almost very little funding. We've had some funding for small meetings in the past, but almost no funding. And I think lasting for 10 years and growing really talks for itself. One of our greatest values is the fact that most members deeply believe that working together is much more efficient than working alone. And I think this is where we need to be really emphasize and never forget that as development practitioners, I know some of you are development practitioners, never work alone. Always try to work with others. Always see that working together is much more efficient and will create greater impact and learning than working alone. The other key, next slide, please. The other key values such as openness and transparency, farmer focus, commitment, deep respect for all stakeholders, inclusivity and safety to talk and challenge each other, authenticity, ownership, and members deeply need to see the value of being part of this network, not just as a club. Too many clubs are about, too many networks are about membership and and image, but this is really about feeling that you want to join and you want to grow and you want to be together with others. In other words, attitude of not just a meeting I need to attend to, but rather a place I want to attend and learn and contribute for the well-being of many. A network always has to go beyond oneself for keeping the vision of the greater good, not the individual gain. So it always goes beyond the individual, the self. This is a movement thinking, and it is biblical as well. Key to a network's efficiency and impact is more values-driven than technical and resource-driven. I'm going to repeat that because that's very, very key. Key to a network, and I'm talking to Echo as well, is efficiency and impact is to a network's efficiency and impact is more values-driven than technical and resource-driven. And there's nothing wrong with technical and resource being driven that way, but it has to be values-driven. And I know Echo is values-driven, so I'm not saying anything, but I know other networks that are very much only technical and resource-driven. If you ever want to facilitate a network or a part of a network, I would encourage you to also challenge that. Thank you. Next slide. That's just a thank you. I hope I'm okay in time. Thank you so much for listening. That is just some, as I said, some things I wanted to share with you tonight from Kenya. And thank you for giving me this opportunity. And I'm open for any questions.
Great, thank you, Stephan. Yeah, for those who do have questions, continue to post them in the Q&A section, and I'll read them, read down the list here, Stephan, and maybe you can address them sure. As we go. We've got about 15 minutes left, so we've got some good time for questions. I appreciate your talk, and just it's neat to hear about the work of CA you're doing with CA in Kenya. One of the things that you did mention a little bit was this challenge of moving away from practices of slashing and burning the residues. And Richard asks if you could address that challenge specifically of smallholder farmers moving away from that practice. And do you have any good success stories that they might be able to glean from, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't think I can answer it like completely, but what I can say is, of course, the slash and burn method is something that's been widely used and is still used. You know, we haven't gotten away from it, in especially in many parts of the world, tropical world. But the better way is not always to just say that is a bad method or that is a bad, but offer a better alternative, offer a solution, or just a better alternative. Because even CA, I can't say it's a solution to food security. I can say it's one methodology that we can try, you know, and even the CA has its limitations, you know, when it's not, you know, it's not going to help with everything, but we offer this new option. And I think as development practitioners, we need to offer options to our farmers, and CA is one of those options. And instead of saying this is bad, or you know, many in the past we've said that slash and burn is bad, or maize is bad, or you know, you're kind of already coming in with a negative, divisive spirit. You offer the solution. What we do as World Renew is we come in and tell people to do very small plots with CA, like 2 meters by 2 meters, just to give you an example, and tell them, you want to try this out? You know, we thought and this might be even after that farmer has visited another CA farmer or not. But they can try it out on a small scale and see for themselves, experiment for themselves. And if they don't like it, that's okay. But if they do if they see some value, for example, maybe in the other part of this field it's very dry and the CA plot is all of a sudden green, you might wonder, okay, why is that part green? I'm curious now, I'm interested now. So that is experimentation that we need to foster and encourage with farmers, and not always tell farmers. We need to listen and experiment and facilitate much more than tell. We've been telling too much what the farmers should do. And I think that is something that I've learned. I did it my first years. I studied in Germany. We learn so we can come down here in Africa and tell people what to do, and it's just wrong. It's just not right. And I'm not saying there's no wisdom in saying things and saying what if, you know, but it's the way you say it and the way you do it that's really important. And that's why the emotional, spiritual, cultural part and the understanding and listening and waiting and being patient is so key. So that's what I can say to that.
Thanks, Stephan. Yeah, that's great. And I think that goes a little bit back maybe towards what you're saying at the end too, of being values driven, and that the value of honoring the knowledge of the smallholder farmer coming together side by side. Those are all they come through in your work, and that's yeah, really neat. So James has got a question asking, what's your main weed management technique with CA system?
Yeah, that's a good question. And CA, I must differentiate here. We do work mostly with smallholder farmers, so small CA plots, mostly 1/4 acre to, I'm going to say maximum half an acre. If at all, a large farm would be 1 acre. So you can see these are very smallholder plots. And there are farmers in Kenya, for example, who have 400 acres or 1,000 acres of CA. They're very few, but they're there. So the management of a smallholder farmer and a large is different. My experience with smallholder farmers, and maybe you have a different experience, is we have not had many issues with weed because the smaller the plot, the more possibility, the more potential we have of covering it with mulch and with branches and with different decomposing organic matter. And the more you cover it, the less the weed have opportunity to grow. And those that come through, we handpick them because they're small plots and we have the labor, we have the time. But usually it's not really been an issue. I've not seen that issue that people talk about myself, but maybe it's something that, of course, when you get into bigger farms where you don't have the covering, when you don't have the opportunity to cover your soil, the 400 acres, for example, you have to do weed control. And that's why you see in some of these CA no-till farms that they do quite a bit of weed control. So that's kind of my experience, that in small farms, weed control has not really been an issue. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Stephan. It looks like James asked another question, asking, how does your team balance data collection and practice, trainings and production, etc.?
Whoa. Okay, I need a little more clarification on that one.
Okay. Yeah, maybe James, if you can just chat in, follow up on that one. We'll give you a little bit to do that, and we'll maybe I'll ask another one here.
Can you read that again? Elliot, that question.
Sure. Yeah, he says, how does your team balance data collection and practice? And then it says in parentheses, trainings, production, etc.
Yeah, I mean, I'm assuming, and that's why I want to hear more from James. But basically, you know, that we need to balance that. And I was just talking to somebody today, from a colleague of mine who's actually in Australia, and we were talking about how we spend so much time often on data collection, often on projects reporting, and those are all good. Those are all accountability measures, and we need to track record. But we spend, sometimes donors, the requirement is so high. We spend so much time on these that we don't spend enough time in the community and figuring out and listening and you know, and finding really out what people want and having fellowship with them. You know, I think that really makes a difference. And I think we'll Renew and others, we really put value on that, on these relationships we have with our partners and with the communities. And that takes time. And so often, even if you want data, you might get more data or from a story, or you might get a more impactful way of measuring from a story than you get from numbers. And I'm not saying numbers are not important, but again, you balance those as well. So I'm not sure if that's helpful, but that's kind of something that I was thinking about when I heard the question.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Stephan. Again, I think going back to some of the four factors that you said, like a
I don't, hello. I think Elliot is frozen, yes. Maybe I can just say one thing before Elliot comes back when he's unfrozen. I don't know how to unfreeze him, but we did a study with, actually I did a study during my master's degree on networks, and are you there, Elliot?
All right, I came back. Sorry.
You were frozen there for a while. I don't know how to
Yeah,
unfreeze you.
I was thinking deeply.
That's okay. No, I was just gonna say that I did a study on Echo. I don't know if you know this, and I actually spent some time at Echo Fort Myers, studying about the network itself, about what I'm comparing it to another network in the Netherlands called Elliot, and they published a newsletter called Low External Input Sustainable Agriculture. Maybe it's, I don't know if it's even there right now. So, and I saw, and I tried to look at it from a faith and non-faith based perspective as well. And it was really interesting to see even how Echo and the impact that Apple has. I'm not saying that Elliot didn't have any impact, but the deeper connections, first of all, as Echo as a family, the way I perceived it, and also the way that they related with people. And there was just a deeper connection there. And we can see that even up to today, Echo is there, and you're being a blessing and an impact to so many around the world. And I think that speaks for itself, what you're doing and these conferences you're doing. And then that was 25 years ago, just to let you know.
That's
so,
great.
Kudos to Echo.
Thanks, Stephan. That's neat. Your research and findings are really cool. Let's see, we've got about 5 more minutes, so I'm going to try to get through a couple other questions here. Sarah asks, what are some ways you can minimize the competition between mulch material and animal fodder? Have you found any creative ways to minimize the competition?
That's an excellent question, Sarah. I think I can't say we find a solution. We're still working on it. It's a huge challenge, especially, like I said, in those areas where animals are present. And most of these areas where we work are semi-arid, they're semi-dry, they're pastoralist or semi-pastoralist. So usually there's goats, there's chickens, there's other things that people keep for their livelihoods. So what we're trying, one of the things that we have, I wouldn't say successfully, but we're trying out is that, for example, when you have a maize plant, we will cut, of course, the corn will go for the family. The top part will now go for the animals. Like we'll literally cut half of that residue, and the lower part will leave in the field. It's not going to be a lot, but it's something. So it's kind of like you're giving everybody something of the product. So that's something we're experimenting with. But overall, the other one is using more green manure and cover crops, especially those green manures that are animal feed friendly. You know, Canavalia, for example, you have to be careful, but other beans and varieties, or those that can offer, feed for the animal, we grow them, and we work with the farmer on those. So there are options, there are opportunities. But yeah, we're still kind of figuring it out and experimenting. And again, what works for one farmer might not work for the other. So we provide options to the farmers and let them decide. But those are the two ones that I can think of at the moment that we have tried, by using whatever part of the crop that might work best for the human, animal, and for the land, or now grow more green manure and cover crops, which I think is it's a more sustainable, better solution. But then again, grow the right ones, right? That'll be the best for that agroecological zone. That'll fix the most nitrogen if possible, and will provide feed for both humans and animals. Yeah, but it's an ongoing learning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that reminds me, coming back to Dr. Thompson's talk a little bit of how much, presenting the numbers of how many kilograms of nitrogen are taken off, both in the yield of the actual food crop that you're taking off, but then the residue, and how much, I was surprised at how much nitrogen is still in the residue. And that's, I think, an important, one of the techniques that I hadn't heard of until hearing you speak at the East Africa conference about cutting the tops of the maize and leaving the rest. What a creative solution, and hopefully we can find some more things like that as well.
And by the way, the whole CA system, I don't know if some of you know, but at least part of it, from what I hear, came from mimicking what the forest does. If you go to a forest and you see so much walking in the forest, all the leaves and everything decomposing, yet the fertility kind of stays the same. The forest is a system of its own, right? So I don't know how true that is, but that's what, for example, one methodology, more faith-based, called Farming God's Way, talks about, saying that we are trying to mimic, what nature shows us. And why can't we do it for our food? Why can't we do it for our sustainability? And I think now even Arocha is coming up with nature-based solutions, so that is, we need to be creative. We need to look for these kinds of things that will enable crops to flourish, but also for the land to flourish, for soils to maintain its fertility and its structure and everything, and not be acidic and just give us the best, So we need to think long term. We're thinking too short term. Are you from Elliot, or are you?
Sorry, Stephan. Yeah, I think we're having a little bit of connection issues. We are approaching the next session, which is networking. So we'll have around 10 minutes just for people to kind of take a minute to network and go back and forth. Maybe Stephan, if so, people are free to go if they need to, but Stephan, if you're still okay with just taking maybe one or two more questions, we've got a few more. Let me, so one of them, Stacy asks, you touched a little bit on improvements in mechanization of CA practices for smallholder farmers.
Yep.
Do farmers have any access to key technologies in Kenya, or maybe, or have you seen any key technologies that have really made a difference in adoption?
Yeah, I think in terms of mechanical, I'm assuming you mean a mechanical adoption. Some of the better mechanical adoptions I've seen is something called a jab planter, which it goes, instead of now doing a hole and getting out your seed from your pocket or whatever, it just does it all together with the fertilizer, and they're efficient. They're not as, they're cost effective. I believe they cost around $40–50 for each. Of course, that's still a lot of money, but if a farmer group can buy one or two, for example, and that's what's happening. And even, for example, for a ripper, which will now, I mentioned the hard pan that sometimes needs to be broken. Getting a ripper is expensive, but if you can have a farmer group, or an association, or even work with the government, for example, in certain counties in Kenya now, CA has become such a thing that farmers are adopting. You can actually rent a ripper and some equipment. So yeah, you have to look for solutions that way and sharing, but they're there. They're still expensive, but they're available if farmer groups and farmers become available, and so we encourage them to share and to buy together. Huh? So that's one of the things we've been doing. Yeah. Other than that, we try for them to also to look for their own solutions wherever it's needed, right? And even come up with creative ways that we can help them, because the solution always comes from everybody, not just from the outsider. In fact, it comes more from the farmer than from the outsider.